Hello and welcome. Thank you for joining us today for our town hall introducing the new small college dues structure. Before we get started, I would like to go over a few things. Please use your Q&A feature to post your questions. You can post your questions at any time, and you can post your questions anonymously if you choose. And if you haven't done already, please feel free to activate closed captions. And last but not least, I want to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded and the recording will be available on our AACRAO webinars page later today. And without any further ado, I would like to hand it over to our board president, Christy Wold-McCormick. Thank you, Christy.
Thank you so much, Velma, and welcome everybody to today's webinar discussing the small college dues. I'm Christy Wold-McCormick. I'm the current president of the board of directors of AACRAO, and presenting with me today is Melanie Gottlieb, executive director. And we are going to, and Jackie Carter, past president, is likely to join us as well. Today we are going, go ahead and you can move to the next slide, thank you. Today we are going to update you on the AACRAO dues structure, specifically addressing the feedback that we have received from our small college members. We're going to specifically review the following items: the background of the dues structure that was implemented over the last year, an overview of the current structure for institutional members, which includes the adjustment for small colleges that was put in place for the 24-25 membership year. And we're going to introduce the new small college structure that was recently approved by the AACRAO Board of Directors. Next slide, please. I'm going to start with a reminder of why AACRAO moved to this new structure last year. We had 4 main goals for the new structure, and they are as follows. First, inclusivity and innovation. This is in line with our goal number 4 in AACRAO's strategic plan. We want to provide inclusivity for early professionals, along with institutions that are managing smaller budgets. We want to create a more active member base by making it easier for individuals to join AACRAO. And a larger member base is more likely to increase community engagement, which is very important to our association. Second, career pathways. Our second goal is to access entry-level individuals in order to provide them with credentialed career pathways per goal number 3 of our strategic plan. The third goal is removing barriers. Our next goal is to remove barriers by reaching deeper into the staffing at our member institutions and in turn raising AACRAO's profile. We want to provide our guidance and resources to as many individuals on our campuses as possible. And finally, the opportunity to reinvent our community is very much a strong goal of ours as well. We've discussed previously the changing educational climate and how AACRAO's membership structure has basically stayed the same for decades. So this is our opportunity to reimagine engagement and community in alignment with our strategic plan. So with that overview of the goals, I'm now going to turn it over to Executive Director Gottlieb.
Thanks, Christy. You can go to... okay. Thanks, Christy. I'm Melanie Gottlieb. I'm the Executive Director of AACRAO. Our strategy leading up to the change was to communicate early and often to the membership. We communicated this through various town halls, leadership meetings, annual meetings, through the exchange, and by email to primary contacts at individual institutions and institutional members. As a result of our many outreach efforts to the membership, we did receive feedback from a group of small colleges that the increase in dues was more than their budgets allowed. We took that back to the board and explored a number of options for the small colleges. We looked at all kinds of things like providing grants and various levels of discounting. In March, we communicated to the membership that for the 2025 and 2026 year and beyond, we would create a new tier for small colleges that was expenditure-based, and assessing the dues specific to the small colleges outside of the larger structure. And that brings us today, where we will share the new dues category specifically designed for the small colleges. Next slide. So first, I want to go over the relevant specifics of the current structure. Our approach was developed to pursue a revenue neutral approach, meaning AACRAO didn't want to see a loss in revenue, but we also weren't looking to increase total dues revenue either. We were trying to keep that revenue approach neutral in order to ensure accessibility for all of our members. The major changes to the structure were that dues calculations were based on an institution's total expenditure as reported to IPEDS as opposed to enrollment. Also, member institutions would be allowed an unlimited number of roster members included in their dues rate. Previously, if a member institution wanted to add an additional member, there was a charge of $302 for each individual member added to the roster. And there were many member institutions who took advantage of that. Separate department school memberships, which also happened at a number of institutions, were no longer necessary, ultimately saving an institution overall money in an open roster structure. Next slide. As a reminder, we made a temporary adjustment for the small colleges for the current dues cycle that we are in. The adjustment included 3 components. First, it aligned with the small colleges' new dues levels that were closest to their previous year's dues assessment. So we wanted to ensure that the dues amount raised was as low as possible for the small colleges. Second, it allowed for any small college that was expected to see a decrease in dues under the new structure to keep that decrease. Third, it set a definition of small college for us to use, which is the definition we've always used, which is an enrollment of under 2,000 for a 2-year college or under 3,000 for a 4-year college. Next slide. The implementation of that fix has been very successful, and we have seen comparable dues renewals this year as we have seen in previous years. We've not seen a large drop or a large change in numbers of institutions or kinds of institutions who have renewed their dues. Based on that, the membership team worked really hard to create and propose a new model to propose to the board. And I'm pleased to inform you that the board has approved the introduction of a brand new dues category specifically designed for the small colleges. It will go into effect July 1, 2025. So that is the next dues renewal cycle. This decision was made after thorough consideration and in recognition of unique challenges faced by smaller institutions. Our overall goal is to create a sustainable structure that allows us to move forward with the new system, but still provides a level of access for the small colleges to ensure that they remain a vital part of our community. As you can see here, the small college category condenses the dues chart from 13 levels to 4. It caps the price for any small college at $1,300, which is much lower than the $7,000 rate for larger institutions at the higher expenditure levels. Additionally, the individual levels are adjusted for a more generous dues assessment. For example, the lowest category has been expanded from under 10 million to under 25 million for small colleges meaning that more small colleges will be eligible for the lowest dues rate of $700. Another update that we put in place for all members is the removal of hospital expenses as a component in the IPED's total expenditures that's been used to calculate. We've heard feedback from small colleges and other institutions that this is a particularly important piece, that hospital expenditures deeply skew the baseline expenditures, and that it is particularly important for smaller medical schools that may have an inflated expenditure due to their hospital expenses that isn't reflected in their actual institutional operational budgets. So, next slide. And I would like to welcome Jackie Carter, our president-elect.
Nope, our
Past
immediate past president.
Oh my gosh, our past president. I'm sorry.
I told you, Melanie, we are in alternate years.
We are.
Hello, everyone, and my apologies for being late. I have a new computer that is not new, actually. But at this moment, I want to make sure you all, or remind you all about voting is open until November 1st. We want to make sure your voices are heard by you going into selecting the slate that you like, that you feel that identifies with you. And, you know, it's important for our leadership. And I say our because this is our association. So please make your voices heard and go on and vote at the link you see on the screen, but you can go to www.acrao.org/vote. And thank you all for your voices and sharing and your support and your service to our association.
Last slide, please. So that was our brief overview of the new dues structure for small colleges. Before we open the floor for questions from members, I want to thank you all for your continued engagement and your feedback throughout this really important process. Your feedback has been invaluable in guiding the changes that we made as an association for our members. There's a wrap-up section here. If you have any questions, that you posted in the chat, hopefully those have been getting answered. But again, we will open the floor at this time to see if there's anything else before we close this up.
So I'm going to move to the Q&A. There are a few questions in the chat, and there are a few questions in the Q&A. Our membership team is on hand to help us answer any questions that are more technical in nature. So the first question was a question in the chat from Cindy Miller, about the definition of small colleges and how it applies to institutions offering graduate and professional degree programs. It is the small college definition, and it's a Carnegie definition. It's actually not something that AACRAO made up, is the same. It is based on 2,000 for a 2-year institution. So that would be a graduate institution. It's 2,000. For a 4-year institution, it is 4,000. If you were combined, and my team can interrupt me or correct me if I'm wrong, but if it is a combined institution, I would believe that the 4-year number would apply. Looks like I would love it. Actually, it would be really helpful if folks would drop their questions in the Q&A as opposed to the chat if possible, because it's a little hard to watch both. I'm going to move over to the Q&A and answer a few of those, and then I will come back and see what else I didn't make in the chat, because we've got plenty of time to address these. Someone asked, do you weigh full-time and part-time students when calculating total enrollment? And Alex has answered that, so I want to point your attention there. Both full-time and part-time students are included in the calculation. It is an FTE calculation. We answered the graduate question. Alex has answered the question around what line they should be looking for, and I'm just going to say that out loud. in the IPEDS breakdown, we'll take the field reported as total expenses and subtract the broken out field of hospital expenses. So we will have to do some manual calculation on our end, but there aren't so many institutions that's particularly burdensome. All right, I have a question from Scott about the changes being approved by the board. Please remind us, is this subject to approval of the full membership? It is not subject to approval of the full membership. This is a structural change. It is relatively in line with the adjustment that we made this year as an exception. And what we've done is taken the exception that we made that's been successful and has been generally accepted, and made that more permanent. Let's see. Laura Jacobs has made a comment. I note very few, if any, small school members on the candidate slate. Does the board desire members from small schools? Absolutely, I'm going to say, and I will ask my board colleagues to chime in here. Absolutely, the board is looking for candidates from smaller institutions. That requires a nomination, either a self-nomination or a nomination from other colleagues, and their NNE makes those choices actually. So the board doesn't pick who gets to be on the slate. So Jackie?
Melanie, that is exactly what I was about to share, that the board doesn't have any decisions about who has been nominated, who ends up being on the slate. That is the Nomination and Elections Committee, which is an external committee from the board. They work together, and this year I served as a liaison only if they had questions. I do not in any liaison, do not share any thoughts, do not share any who they pick. We're there to provide guidance if they have questions about particular role. Basically, I was a fly on the wall. They really didn't even know that I was there. And so it is again an external committee that operates separately from the board, and they work hard with the nominations that they got, and they selected as a board committee, rather. They selected as a committee who they wanted to move forward, and they had discussions, deep discussions, and that is how that works out. We see the slate, the board sees the slate generally right before the organization sees the slate.
And I can just add to that, as a former NNE member from many, many years ago, we strive really hard, that committee strives really hard to ensure that we've got good representation that really tries to align with our membership profile. So they look for diversity in institution type, institution size, geographic region, gender, racial, you name it. I mean, they really look for as diverse of a slate that represents us as a membership association, because we want our voices to reflect those of our membership. So I know that's always a top priority for them.
And finally, on that same topic, I'd love to point out that Rosalind Perry, who is our Group 5 VP of Access and Equity, she is the Access and Equity area is where the small college issues PAC exists. And Roz is from Allegheny College, which is defined as a small college. It is absolutely a small college. So there is small college board representation right now. And we absolutely would like more. Scott has a great comment, and I think this is probably an excellent education point for folks. His comment is, I believe that NNE used to have guidance for as much diversity as possible, including public, private, and small, large representation. Are those guidelines still in place for NNE, or might they be reiterated since so few small college colleagues have had a chance to serve recently. So I may ask Jackie, who's our current representative on NNE, if you could talk to that, and I will follow up with anything else.
Scott, yes. Hi, Scott. Yes, they are still absolutely in place. But I tell you what I can tell you that there was such a low number of total nominations. So they had to work with what they had, and everybody that was nominated was, you know, were great candidates. And so, but they did look at all of that and put it all together. But it's the total number that we get in nominations, and and then again, the low number we've seen for a while in voting too. And so those things are still in place. And they really this NNE committee really looked in and talked about and discussed, and sometimes they took someone out just so they can meet these this diversity that we see. It's a holistic process. It's a public-private. It's the type of institution, the location of the institution, the individuals. It's all those things into one. And so that is
Thanks,
still
Jackie.
a number one priority for the committees.
Yeah, thank you, Jackie. I'll reiterate that when I was formerly on NNE, when I was a member, I mean, we really looked very hard at a cross-cut of diversity at every level, just like you described, all kinds of diversity, because that's what makes AACRAO stronger and better. But it's difficult. And I think some of that challenge is really about post-COVID. Volunteerism at many associations has been more challenging, and creating election slates at many associations has been challenging. I'm hopeful that we can change that. I'd love to address a comment in the chat. And so if you all haven't seen it, Michael Murray is introducing himself in the chat as the vice chair for the Small College Issues Committee. And he's hoping that you'll join in Seattle, but also help and build the committee so that we can identify a great candidate to put forward at some point. And so please reach out and be connected. There is something from Liesl Fowler, and so I'm going to make this comment. It's a question. It's really more of a comment, maybe Jackie, to send feedback to NNE. If a colleague was nominated perhaps numerous times, would the NNE committee be able to provide feedback to those who do not make the slate so that they might be a better candidate in the future? I think that's just some feedback to take back to NNE the next time NNE meets.
Okay, I would share that, and I also will share that, and I just lost my thoughts. It's old age time, and when that thought come back to me, if we're still on, I'll share it out because it just went boop.
Excellent. I see there's another question in the Q&A asking if we know if there are any small HBCU schools. I'm going to ask, I don't off the top of my head know the size of the HBCUs, and I'm going to ask Martha and Alex to do a quick check of small college, maybe MSIs, HBCUs, ANAPZ, HSIs, any of those, and just with a yes or no, that would be great. And I can have, they're going to scan that while we're looking.
Melanie, I think this is what I was going to say.
Okay.
I understand the frustration of being nominated and several times, but the committee just works works and just they do the best that they have. And so I don't know. I don't even know if I would say they could even think about, just because someone has been nominated several times, that automatically should make them on the slate. I wouldn't say that. But each committee is different, and so they work to do the best that they can, and looking at the whole group who have been nominated for certain roles. And so they make the decision together. It's not one person making a decision, even though there's a chair and chair-elect. There's not one person that's, making the decision. They come together in the decision based on when I was on there, and also at this time on consensus. So they really talk about it and narrow it out. And so it's not one person guiding the decision as well.
Okay, I've got a couple more things on the Q&A. The first is a response to are there small HBCU schools? Alex from the membership team has done a quick scan, and roughly 1/3 of the HBCUs fall under our definition of small college. So there you go. There's a comment, and I do want to address this comment. The comment says, the slate may be diverse, but the voting population is overwhelmingly large school, which leads to less diversity size-wise. The slate was much more diverse when there was only one candidate per office. I have a couple of comments to that, but my board colleagues may also have some comments. So I want to give you a little bit of information. We have not yet looked at and compared the individual institution type of voting members, actually not of voting members, of members who voted. We are going to do that. That is on our slate of work this year, to go back and see what kind of data we have on the voting and compare that to this year and compare it to the next year, because we do want to track that and make sure. But I'm going to tell you that the percentage and the actual numbers of people who vote is minuscule. And so the key to making your voice heard on a particular candidate is 100% about voting and encouraging your colleagues to vote. Voting is important. That's how our voices get heard, both in the association and nationally. We're in an election season, folks. Let's all vote. So I will also comment that there are some entity challenges when you do have a competitive slate, because if you are trying to ensure true diversity in the way that AACRAO defines it, and that is all levels of diversity, you need enough candidates in order to choose 2 candidates for what's missing. And so there's some complexity and nuance to that, but it can be very challenging. NNE works very, very hard at ensuring we have diversity. I don't know if my board colleagues have anything that they'd like to add to that.
I can just say that I would echo that voting is a challenge. While I think there is that potential, for large institutions to potentially skew things, I don't think, and we'll see what the numbers show us, but I don't think that has been a reality. And in fact, sometimes, through some of the caucuses and others, there's a lot of momentum to kind of build some interest in voting, through some of those channels as well. So it's not always, I think, the large institutions that have that opportunity for strength in voting numbers. So I'm interested to see those results as well. But as Melanie said, the numbers have been very abysmal in terms of the percentage of our membership that votes. We'd love to see that greater across all levels of our membership, but we'll see what those data show us.
Yeah, and I was gonna say, I believe I was the chair of NNE in 2013 and somewhere like in there. But I would say 2012 till now, we have not reached a total number of even 600 of members that voted. If I'm wrong, someone corrects me. We have not, the highest we've been is like 500 something. We have never even reached 600. And what's our total number of members even before we opened the membership roster, right? We have
Yeah.
not, the number of votes, we have not reached 600, which is low itself. But I just remember being in the low 500s from 2012 until as recent as last year. And so what I say to people, we're in election time in our personal lives, and we don't always know the candidates on those lists. And so, but we should vote. We should vote. And personally, I apply the same thing in how I vote for AACRAO. That same mindset.
Absolutely. I want to also call attention to Roz's really thoughtful comment in the chat. So make sure you read it. That really talking about how NNE really does think about the diversity of the slate and the rubrics they use. It really is incredibly rigorous and intentional, and it is entirely separate from the board. So things to be aware of, but I hope that you will all vote and grow your engagement, because that's how this all works. I'm just going to look and see. Suggestion: is it possible to put the voting link on the main landing page? It was difficult to get to. I think we rotate it in and out of the main page depending on what's happening. But I'll take that feedback back to comms. Know that if you want to vote, we have a permanent link, acrao.org/vote. That's always the link to vote. That's where our election stuff is, in order to keep it simple. So you can always do that. There you go. Thank you, Belma. A comment from Gwen: I don't find that the information provided about the candidates gives me any real basis to make a decision. Everyone is qualified, so how would I choose? Perhaps a standard information could be provided about each candidate, including the size of the school, so I have a way to decide on the basis without researching every school. That's also feedback we can bring back to NNE for consideration. Absolutely. Just looking to see if there are more questions. Oh. And there's a comment from Jackie. I'm sorry, from Roz. Nope, a comment from Roz. I'm sorry, I read Jackie, but I was looking at Roz. She said, Jackie's correct. As VP of Access and Equity, I'm intentional encouraging my caucuses and PACs to vote when the slate is presented. Also, remember, you can self-nominate. You can self-nominate. You cannot complain if you're not being purposeful in participating. Exercise your vote, nominate your colleagues, and get involved. Yeah. So that is a call to action.
Yeah, and add to that, I know myself and other board members such as Roz and Cassandra, at annual meeting, we go around and we ask people, remind people to nominate someone, nominate themselves. And I also know for sure the last few years, the chair and the chair-elect of NNE have also gone around during annual meeting time, encouraging people to nominate. And so I know we're encouraging, and so And Gwen, you're right. Sometimes the decision is hard because they are all qualified. And so on one hand, that's a good thing that they are qualified. And so that means to me that NNE is doing the work. And so yeah.
All right. I think we may be, seems like things are quieting down. And
Melanie, I was
you-
reading the answer, someone shared that they were an alternate and saw some comments. I'm not sure about themselves, and so I'm not sure. I didn't get into any of that information, but I'm not sure as an alternate how that viewing process worked. And so that's something else that we need to take back. And so on behalf of whenever you were on the committee as an alternate, I hear you and I share you, and I apologize for what you saw. And I don't even know what you saw, because I myself didn't get into the information as a
I
board
agree. I think,
liaison, as a board
yeah,
lead. I didn't.
Go ahead.
No, I was done.
Okay. I'm gonna say I agree. I think we're gonna take that piece of feedback back to the NNE committee. And we don't want anyone to have a bad experience. So that feedback will come back. If whoever that was, it was an anonymous
Mhm.
it was an anonymous post. If
Yes.
someone would like to reach out to someone on the staff or someone on the board to share that information more directly so that we could do more research, we would love to hear it. So
Please, feel free to reach out to me if you would like. I am open, and my email is slack@wooster.edu. I'm also putting it in the chat.
thanks, Jackie. All right. It seems like the questions have been answered. Christy had to step away. She is about to board a plane, and so she couldn't stay until the very end. But I want to thank you all for coming. I want to thank you for the questions and for the engagement. Your voice, we want your voices. We want your participation. It is the diversity of AACRAO that keeps us strong and gives us the higher ed perspective that we need. And so stay engaged, please. And if you have any questions, you can always reach out to the board. The small colleges can reach out to their vice president for access and equity, who's Rosalind Perry, or you can certainly reach out to me. The recording will be available and that link is there, but it's on the website. It'll be on the website sometime later this week. And tell all your friends to vote, friends. All right. Thank you, everyone. Take care. Have a good rest of the week.